when I was thinking about talking to you, I was thinking about what got me into mixed martial arts, and it was the characters. That's what really got me going into it. What was it for you, Blake? What was it that got you started?
I don't know really. I think maybe there was an element of characters. I think there's something in that kind of competitive sport. And I have to say, like, I've never been a huge boxing fan. I don't mind a bit of boxing, but I've never been a huge boxing fan. But I've always been interested in like Van Damme movies when I was a kid. And, everything you watched as like a kid growing up in the 90s was either like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Thundercats, all that stuff that had an element of kind of like fighting and martial arts in it and all that kind of stuff. So once I was aware of MMA, like around the time of like your Chuck Liddells and Matt Hughes and people like that and Tito Ortiz, then that was probably the closest thing I've ever seen to like a real version of those movies that I loved as a kid, or those kind of like Street Fighter beat 'em ups that I would play as a kid. And so I think that's what kind of got me into it. And I mean, still to this day, my brother, who's younger than me, but about 2 or 3 stone heavier than me, will come up behind me, get me in a body lock and shout Matt Hughes and try and slam me to the ground. And that was when it was on like Bravo or something, wasn't it? Like it was one of those times where, the youngsters out there won't realize how difficult it was to look up the thing in the TV guide and then set the VCR recorder for something and all that. And, you only had like one telly, so you couldn't really like take it over too much. Whereas now, you just series link everything and you don't have to miss a card if you don't want to. But back then it was like, you just watch it sporadically. And I think then I tuned into The Ultimate Fighter years down the line. I think it was the John Jones, Chael Sonnen series, The Ultimate Fighter, that had Gastelum and Uriah Hall. And I was hooked on the personalities. Like I really enjoyed Chael Sonnen. I thought he was great fun. But also once Uriah Hall hit that spinning kick, you were just like, whoa,
terrifying. Still scary. Still
scary. So scary. And also what I loved in a way was his reaction afterwards. He was apologizing to him when he was on the ground. And I was like, this isn't about, it's not thuggery or anything like that. These are martial artists, and that they're having an opportunity to showcase their skills in the best way possible. But in doing so, people will get hurt. But they don't, the fact that he's apologizing afterwards, I mean, that just said a lot to me about like what these fighters must go through mentally, but what they're capable of doing physically, and these kind of amazing things, and the beauty and the technique of some of those knockouts as well. As much as you look at it from the guy getting knocked out's perspective, you're like, oh God, that's horrible. And sometimes like my wife will watch some of it and she'll be like, oh, I can't watch this. Yeah. But when you're seeing it from the attacker's point of view, that how he set that up, the feints, the speed, the technique, all that stuff, there's a real beauty to it. And I think I can tune into that side of it as well, which is why I suppose I love it so much.
Yeah, talking about how difficult it was to watch mixed martial arts and get into it when we were younger. I remember me and my friends, we used to do like a pretend like fight club in my mate's garden, and we were just messing around, kids doing wrestling moves and stuff. And my mate Duncan would always do axe kicks on people. Someone would be in a headlock and he'd come in with his axe kick. I was like, what are you doing? What's that? And he's like, oh, crow cup. I was like, oh, great.
Oh, wow.
What's a crow cup? And he had all these hooky pride tapes and stuff, and that kind of got me going. And I think crow cup from then has always kind of been my guy. I think I judged so many of the fighters by what they did when they fought crow cup, and his kind of personality is the sort of like gold standard of a terrifying MMA fighter. Did you have someone like that? Did you have a fighter who kind of you first fell in love with, who you first really got hooked on?
No, I don't think I did. I think I just really enjoyed the sport. I mean, Liddell was someone that probably stands out to me a little bit because he was like the guy at the time, and he had the celebration. And, I was a big like old school like WWF fan. I loved Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan, all that. And you got used to like their moves or their celebrations and something like that. And there was something you could always pinpoint on like the Iceman, Chuck Liddell. And when he won and he did that arms out thing and all that, you're just like, that was amazing. And it was like his thing. But ultimately, I think you just gravitate towards different personalities and different fight styles. And that's the other really interesting thing is there's some people with fight styles that go, I love that style. Not overly bothered about them in terms of personality. And there's other people who are like not overly bothered about the fight style, but personality wise, I think they're great. there's some, and some have both. You know, you look at like a Max Holloway or a Robert Whittaker and people like that, they've got both. I love the personality and the fight style, you know. So yeah, it's just the sport as a whole. I think I can just really watch it, but there's certainly characters in there that leap out at you.
Yeah, I used to be a kind of old school WWE, WWF fan. Mark, who's the producer here, massive wrestling fan. Do you feel like the fighters that we're talking about there, say your Chuck Liddells, like your Rampage Jacksons, that era of fighter, do you feel like they were a sort of a nice segue for wrestling fans to get into mixed martial arts, because they were these absolute larger than life characters, weren't they? They were kind of straight out of comic books, these guys. They were incredible.
I think one of the big things about that is that they had the ability to showcase their personalities a little bit more than what the UFC athletes do now. Like since the Reebok deal came in and now the Venom deal, you know, they're uniformed athletes. And I understand why the UFC want to do that. It looks more legitimate. They're fighting against this idea that, you know, there's a lot of people in the world that still don't think that MMA is as regulated as it is. But what it makes you lose is that personality of these fighters, which, you know, back then, Rampage coming down with the chain around his neck and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, all stuff like that is great. Like George St. Pierre coming on with the gi, they represented so much of their personality. And you can look back, you can look at boxing now. Some of the entrances for boxing are as talked about as the fight, you know. And I think that it would be nice to see. We interviewed on my podcast that we interviewed Angela Hill a while back, and she was talking about when she was in Invicta, she would do like cosplay stuff and like dress up in old school. And if you follow Angela Hill on Instagram now, she's always doing some really brilliant stuff on Instagram where she's dressing up as a character and promoting something in as that character or whatever. And it's nice. And we saw a tiny sneak peek of it with Adesanya versus Whittaker when he got to do the dance and all that stuff. And I know Ortega against Volkanovski wore the mask recently, but God, it'd be really lovely to give these athletes a bit more free reign to truly showcase their personalities with ring walks and all that kind of stuff. But as I do understand why the UFC is doing the uniform thing, and obviously financially it's of benefit to them as well. But I would like to see a bit more of the personality shine through like they did in the old days.
Yeah. Do you have a fighter now who, no matter where you are, you could be, no matter where you are on the West End, or you could be around the world filming somewhere, no matter what you're doing, you know you're going to make some time that day to 100% sit down and watch them fight? Who is your kind of like must watch, can't miss fighter at the moment?
Oh, well, I've got a few, to be honest. I mean, I could throw Sean O'Malley in that mix. Just again, fight style wise, is so exciting to watch. Where's Zabit? Zabit, come back. Like, where you been, mate? Where's Zabit Magomedsharipov? But then, I mean, if we're talking real recent, I mean, Khamzat Chimaev.
Yeah.
Jeez, like what is happening? That was something else at the weekend against Li Jingliang. I mean, that is a guy that we all have to pay very, very close attention to. And the hype seems to be real. Before that fight, you were like, you know, he's fought guys that we as British fans would know, like Rhys McKee and people like that, and he's dominated them. But to go against a ranked opponent and deal with them the way he has done, that was scary and amazing. And so yeah, I mean, Khamzat at the moment, but I mean, I could honestly, Robert Whittaker, Max Holloway, I could list loads, Adesanya. So yeah, I really could go on and on about the fighters that I really need to make time to watch, because I am just a huge fan of the sport.
What do you want to see next for Khamzat? There's talk of Nate Diaz. I'm not sure how keen Nate is on it, but what do you want to see for him?
I hate the idea of a Nate Diaz fight. I think that's got a lot to do with the fact that Nate's got one fight left on his contract. And it's that kind of UFC model of going, let's kind of bring the old one down to launch the new star that's coming in. Again, as a business model, I understand it, but I don't want Nate Diaz near that fight. I want Nate Diaz to fight Dan Hooker. I think he's the new BMF of the UFC after what he's done lately. I know he was unfortunate, well, not even unfortunate. He was just outclassed and muscled by Makachev, who's, I think, a champion in waiting. But in terms of Khamzat Chimaev, I'd like to see him fight Neil Magny, just because Neil Magny was the only guy during the whole, oh my God, Hamzat's amazing and no one wants to fight him. Neil Magny was putting his hand up constantly and going, I will fight him. Dana, over here, I'll fight him. And Dana was like, anyone? Neil's like, yeah, please. Anyone? Ah, okay, no one. So I want him to fight Neil Magny. I think Neil Magny's the real kind of like, he'll probably hate being called a gatekeeper, but I think he is the gatekeeper to the top fights in the welterweight division. So I'd like to see him fight Neil Magny. But I tell you what, with the popularity of Hamzat Chimaev, I mean, there are probably permutations to how the Masvidal Edwards fight goes and whatever's going on with Vicente Luque, who's also in the mix for the Nate Diaz fight. I think Hamzat might find himself in a title shot very soon. I think I'll be surprised if next year, I'd like to see him get 1 or 2 more wins before a title shot. But the way the UFC works, if he fought for the title in June of next year, I would not be surprised.
Yeah, I mean, there's some guys who come in clearly with all the talent in the world. Let's say like a Tom Aspinall, who's very clear in like, I'm going to take my time. I'm going to build up. Yep. I'm not in a hurry. This guy's not hanging around, is he? He's not hanging around Chimaev.
No, not at all. He just wants to throw himself in there, and good luck to him. I mean, Tom Aspinall was another guy that I've had on the MMA Fan podcast, and he was a great chap, but he just seems so level-headed. Yeah. And he's so just like, I'm just going to pick them off one at a time and gradually get to the stage where I know I can compete for a belt. And I think, other than maybe Cyril Gane, Tom's probably got the best footwork in the heavyweight division. I think he can cause a lot of people problems. I saw on his Instagram, he signed a contract. I don't know who it's to fight, but he signed something. I don't know if you know any rumors you want to put out there. Let me know. But yeah, so I'm excited about that. I hope he's got some good fights coming up. But I think it's smart. Why rush? Why rush? He's a young guy, and heavyweights mature that little bit later. That heavyweights seem to have a longer career because less probably based on speed and stuff like that. Like you look at Frankie Edgar fighting at 40 in the bantamweight division, you're just like, it just starts making me feel a bit uncomfortable. Yeah. Whereas Glover Teixeira at light heavyweight, 42-year-old champion. I mean, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about the podcast, Blake. We can hear, you speaking now, your stuff. You're clearly passionate about the sport. How did this all get started?
So I went on Stu Whiffin's Off the Beaten Track podcast, which is a music-based podcast where he gets loads of musicians and actors and people just talk about music from their lives and stuff like that. We talked about it we did the podcast for about 40 minutes, and somehow we got on to talking about MMA afterwards. And the chat about MMA went on for about an hour and a half. And like the actual reason we were talking was done in about 40 minutes. So then we realized, hang on a minute, we're clearly both really passionate about this. And neither of us has really got another mate that we can talk to about MMA with the amount of passion and knowledge that we both had about it. So we thought we'd start a podcast about it. And we genuinely thought it'd be the two of us talking, no one really listening, and that would be it. And it's just become this thing that's just, I mean, we've had some incredible guests on the podcast, like we do like your preludes to a 268 and post shows and all that kind of stuff as well. And we go through the divisions, like bantamweight was one of the ones we did recently because I'm a huge fan of bantamweight. I think that's my favorite division. But we've had some incredible guests on, like Alexander Volkanovski, Tyron Woodley, Dan Hardy, Mark Goddard. Those two were incredible chats. And, we've talked to Kenny Florian, Angela Hill, some real big stars of the sports, and then your British guys like Paddy Pimblett, Molly McCann, Jojo Calderwood, Paul Craig, all of those guys, and it's just been amazing. And then we've also had like just celebrity fans on, like James Arthur, Stephen Dorff, the actor from Blade, came on because he was doing a film about MMA. And then we've also had we got Lee Mack on, the comedian Lee Mack on, because he's never watched an MMA fight before. Gave him a classic fight to watch. We gave him Andrei Arlovsky versus Travis Brown, that one round just chaos fight. And we had a good chat about it afterwards. It's really funny. We did the same thing with Ben Shepherd, and we gave him Cub Swanson versus Doo Ho Choi. Oh, that's one of my favorite fights. Cub Swanson, Doo Ho Choi. Oh, I love Cub Swanson as well.
Yeah, me too.
So we've kind of just loads of different things, but the fact that we've got some of these incredible fighters and guests on. I mean, I've been in rooms with big Hollywood actors and stuff like that. And it's, it's never really bothered me, because I just think, well, you do what I do, you just get paid a lot more to do it than I do. That's, you're in a room with like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Leo DiCaprio, you're just like, we do the same job. You probably do it a little bit better than me, but and you get paid more, that's fine, whatever.
Just a matter of opinion. It's just a matter of opinion.
That's it. Yeah, it's a matter of opinion, and it's all subjective. But except the finances, that's not subjective. That's factual. But that it never really bothers me. I'm not like starstruck by any of that stuff. Fighters, on the other hand, I think the mentality to do that and the physical grind that you have to go through in a training camp, I'm in awe of them. I really am. So to have been able to speak to these people on a pretty regular basis now as well, since doing the podcast, which has only been going for about 7 months or whatever, has been really incredible. And I've just loved every single minute of it. It's just been a real pleasure to do. And what we like to do on the podcast as well is do quite in-depth interviews. We're not just talking about, oh, what's the fight coming up? How do you see that fight going? It's like, how do you deal with the negativity of social media? How have you overcome adversity in other aspects of your life other than MMA? And what I think listeners can really get from that on the MMA Fan Podcast is, if they're going through troubles in their own life, and let's be honest, the last 2 years has been incredibly difficult for people, then you can listen to these stories. Lerone Murphy we had on, a guy that was shot in the face and spat out the bullets and is now undefeated in the UFC. Like, we've had him on the show talking about his story and stuff like that. And JJ Wilson, who I don't know if he's a featherweight, now lightweight, I think in Bellator. Right. He got shot during an armed robbery, but took down the armed robber. He does deep sea diving and can hold his breath for about 5 minutes. He's like Aquaman. Like, just these really fascinating little stories from people. And I think there's some great ones. And also what we like to do is get like people from Cage Warriors on. So like Paul Hughes, who's just won the Cage Warriors interim featherweight belt. His ceiling's really high. He could be in the UFC soon. Ian Gary, we had a great chat with him. He was singing Grease Lightning in the middle of the chat, and we talked about a certain fish punch that I've been known for. And, these were great chats. And so you kind of got all these kind of big stars that could really inspire you, but also we've got these guys from like the Cage Warrior scenes that, if you get into it now, you can know these guys before they're big stars in the UFC. And I think that's a lovely thing as well, So I'm waxing lyrical about the podcast, but I'm passionate about it. And I do think that it's got something in there for everyone. If you're a fan of MMA, check out the MMA Fan Podcast.
Yeah, mate. If you're not passionate about it, it's not going to work, is it?
Exactly, yeah.
There you go. How have you found dealing with the MMA community? Because, you're a well-known face, not known for this side of things. Do you feel like you had to sort of win them over a little bit?
Do you know what? I think... not overly. I mean, I suppose like everyone's been pretty friendly. Like I've got a little bit of a relationship with Sean Sheehan now over at the Severe MMA podcast. Lovely bloke, really nice guy. And I've had like little Twitter chats with like Adam Cattrall and Nick Pete. Nick Pete invited me when Adam Cattrall was away, when they were doing the Fight Disciples podcast. Nick Pete had me on as a fill-in guest. And we were talking about fights coming up and stuff. And the response to it on social media was a surprise that I knew what I was talking about. But that's lovely. That's not, why should I don't expect anyone to think I know what I'm talking about. And also the other caveat we have with the MMA Fan Podcast is both me and Stu have never had a fight. He trains a little bit of Muay Thai. I've trained a little bit of MMA, but like minor stuff. And so we don't necessarily know what we're talking about. We're just incredibly passionate fans. So we're not really giving a huge amount of like technical breakdowns. We're not trying to be Dan Hardy or anything like that. But what we are doing is just talking about the permutations of fights and getting excited as fans going, this means that he'll probably fight him. Why hasn't he called out him? That doesn't make sense to just, I hate it when fighters, and the fighters I'm so passionate about, like your Lerone Murphys, Arnold Allen. Arnold Allen's a lovely bloke. We've chatted to Arnold Allen, really nice guy. I wish he fought more regularly, but he's been unfortunate with some of the injuries and stuff like that. But people like that, they rarely call out names. And I'm just like, call them out, because as a fan, we will get excited about it. We'll get on the socials and put pressure on the UFC to make that fight happen. But because they're just lovely, humble guys, they're just going, no, I would like a ranked opponent, but I'll fight anyone the UFC puts in front of me. But that means that you probably won't get the ranked guy and all that kind of stuff. So we want to back these guys. We want to see British MMA, which I think is in a really great place at the moment, progress and keep really doing well,
Yeah. if you were to have a kind of ideal guest on the podcast, you can have anyone from the world of MMA right now, who would it be?
If we could have anyone from the world of MMA, God, I mean, there's one half of me that's like, who do I really want to chat to? And there's another half of me that's like, who would get the listenership of the podcast up? Yeah. If you're talking listenership of the podcast, you would say like Khabib or Conor but I mean, I'd love to chat to Dana White. Actually, I mean, Dana White would be like one of the
I
main
thought the
guys.
exact same thing.
Yeah.
Just when I said the question, I thought, because there's just so much to go at. And he is such a showman. You know what I mean? He is such a guy who's aware of the cameras that you'd love to just try and peel it back a little bit more, right?
Yes.
Just try and get a little bit deeper.
Yeah, try and get a little bit deeper with Dana. That'd be amazing. But also, just from my own personal thing, I'm a huge Robert Whittaker fan. I'm a huge Dan Hooker fan. And what I love about them is they both seem like guys that you could hang out with and have a lovely time. There'd be no ego. There'd be no brashness. Like, I don't think that hanging out with someone like Colby Covington would be a huge amount of fun. But I do think hanging out with a Robert Whittaker or a Dan Hooker would be a great time, and so, yeah, that would be good. And I think I love Tai Tuivasa, but I think he'd be too much for me. I think after one shoey, I think I'd be done.
This is how much of a good guy Dan Hooker is. So I was supposed to interview him last Wednesday or Thursday. I can't quite remember, from when he was in Abu Dhabi. So I'd spent a couple of hours kind of really working on like, how am I going to structure this interview? Where we're going to get? How are we going to make this flow nicely? Blah, 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 blah. Came to it, got a phone call from the press officer saying, sorry, Dan can't make it. He's feeling a bit jet lagged. And my first thought, usually your first thought is, wasting my time. But first thought was like, I hope he gets some rest. I hope he gets some rest. I hope he feels okay.
Well, because it's been a mental time for him.
You just want him to be good, man. You just want him to be good.
And for what he's done, like arriving 2 days before the Hack Press fight, still making weight. And we've seen a few things with like your Nick Diaz's and Jesus, Paulo Costa. I mean, what are you doing? The whole weight thing's there. But for Hack Parast and Hooker to have the visual issues they had, get over, make weight, do the fight. Hooker had a great performance, showcased more of his wrestling. And then he's like, oh, yeah, I'll take on Makhachev, the absolute boogeyman of the division, on 4 weeks' notice, when Eugene Behrman's not here. He's gone back to New Zealand. A lot of my corner aren't around. Yeah. He didn't even have like proper clothes with him. We made a joke on our show that like he's probably wearing like Arlovsky's old pants and stuff like that, like that have been lost property or something like that. What's he wearing? Obviously, the UFC have given him clothes and stuff, but it's just it's for him to do that. It just showcase what kind of guy he is, and that's why I think your reaction is, God, I hope he gets some rest.
Yeah, I just want to be.
He's been through a lot.
Yeah, he has been through a lot, bless him. When you look at the UFC landscape as we come to the end of the year, looking ahead to 2022, what are the fights? What are the fighters, the things that are really kind of getting you excited?
Oh, well, we got Garner Ngannou coming up in January, haven't we? That'll be a good one. I love Brendan Moreno. Again, I don't think I needed to see the Figueiredo free fight so soon. I think Figueiredo seems to struggle with weight every now and again as well. But I think that 125-pound division is actually looking pretty good. The bantamweight division in general is incredible. I'm a big fan of Corey Sandhagen, but Peter Yan is just something else. I think looking at Peter Yan, we could be looking at the next dominant champion in the UFC. I think he beat Sterling. I think Rob Font's great, but I think he takes care of him. He's already beaten Aldo. I don't think a Sean O'Malley could hold a candle to Petr Yan yet. So I think we could be. I mean, I'd love to see Jack Shaw do well. Welshman Jack Shaw. I'd love to see him rocket up the rankings, but that bantamweight division is something else. The featherweight division is absolutely stacked. I love Alexander Volkanovski, another guest we've had on the MMA Fan Podcast. Really lovely bloke. Him versus Holloway, if Holloway beats Rodriguez. I know Volkanovski's 2-0 up, but no one is not going to want to watch that fight. If that was it, you're going to tune into Holloway Volkanovski 3. That is going to be a crazy fight. Giga Chikadze doing really well as well. And there's just so many. The rise of Makhachev, Khamzat Chimaev. Chimaev Usman, if it happens, that is going to be huge. That's going to be massive. what's Yuri Prohashka going to be like? Is he going to take the belt, and is he going to be this really exciting guy that we all hope him to be in the light heavyweight division? God, there's so much to think about and consider with the UFC. And then, you know, Irish MMA is getting a real boost this weekend with, you know, Peter Queally in Bellator taking on Pitbull, James Gallagher, Sinead Kavanagh taking on Cyborg as well. And we interviewed Leah McCourt recently. That hasn't gone out, but she's kind of a kind of new woman coming through the Irish MMA scene that people are excited about. There's loads. I could go on and on. Connor will probably come back, won't he? Yeah. Connor Dustin 4, maybe. I mean, what the hell? I mean, Pete, regardless of what you think of that fight and whether you think Connor's going to be outgunned, that's a fight we're all going to get up for. The build up to it will be interesting. And yeah, there's so much. Will Usman carry on his dominance? I mean, there's so many storylines and about what's going to happen. I want to see Tom Aspinall do well in the heavyweight division as well. So yeah, there's loads and loads to get excited about and consider in MMA. I could go on about it all day.
I can see exactly how you can go on a music podcast and spend 2 hours talking about MMA.
Yeah,
I love the passion for the sport, and I tell you what, this today has shown the unifying force of MMA, that a Millwall fan, a West Ham fan can sit down, chop it up, and keep it civil. Blake, thanks.
Well, I didn't know you were West Ham before this. Otherwise, it would have gone completely differently.
Oh, Blake, look, thank you so much for your time. Guys, make sure you go and check out the MMA Fan Podcast. Absolutely cracking. Some brilliant archive stuff in there. And as he says, loads of stuff coming up. And Blake, thanks so much for your time, man. That was fantastic.
Thank you very much for having me, mate. Thanks very much.